On our desert island on this occasion is the excellent English singer Dame Janet Baker. Dame Janet, 8 discs that may have to last a long time. Was it difficult to choose?
Very difficult indeed. I've chosen, generally speaking, composers that I can't live without. Mm-hmm. Not all the composers that I couldn't live without, because, again, that's not possible in the time or in the number of records. And certain instruments, certain sounds of instruments that I also couldn't live without.
You have a lot of records at home, a big collection.
Quite a big collection, yes.
Could you adapt to solitude?
I think I could, very easily. Mm.
And what would you be happiest to have got away from?
People, I think.
You mean masses of people?
Yes. The fact of being alone is something that I never am and would fascinate me.
What's the first record you have on that small pile?
The first one is something I'd like to wake up with every morning. I can't say that it's my favourite instrument, but certainly the instrument that I couldn't live without. The Scarlatti Sonata I've chosen is just something very delightful and happy.
Who's playing it, and what is the instrument?
Richard Lester is playing the harpsichord.
Richard Lester playing the opening of the Scarlatti Sonata in A minor, K54. Now, you're a Yorkshire girl. Whereabouts in Yorkshire?
I was brought up in York. It's a wonderful city to spend one's childhood in.
Oh, indeed. Do you have brothers and sisters?
No. I had a brother who died many years ago when I was 10. So, although I was brought up as an only child, I don't feel like one because I can still remember him.
Was there a lot of music in the home?
Of the kind that came through a wireless set, yes.
Yes, your father did in fact sing in a choir.
Yes, he did.
And so did your brother, so you had to. How old were you when you started?
I would think about 9.
I believe your school was connected with York Minster. Did you sing in that glorious building?
As a schoolgirl, part of the school setup, yes. We used to have our term communion services there and felt very much part of that marvellous building. And the school was about 20 yards away from the east door, and I felt very influenced by it, growing up in its shadow and hearing the clock all the way through the day.
Yes.
Marvellous.
Were you given piano lessons?
No, I didn't study piano at school. I think the first time I began piano was about 13 years old, but I sang at school quite a bit.
When you left school, you sang in one of the great Yorkshire choirs.
Yes, the Leeds Philharmonic Society.
And I believe a soloist on one occasion.
Yes, I was. It was really my putting the first toe into the water, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the whole episode of being a member of a large choir was quite extraordinary. Standing in a line and being part of that enormous sound that only the northern choirs can make, it was a revelation to me.
What did you do when you left school?
I worked in a bank.
Do figures mean something to you?
No, figures don't mean anything to me at all, and I think it was amazing that the bank employed me for as many years as it did. I think I must have put a spanner in the works many times, but they were very kind. No, figures don't at all.
You won the Silver Rose Bowl at Harrogate Festival. Was it that gave you the idea that you could one day, perhaps, be a professional singer?
I think it helped, certainly. It was the first time I hate to use this word, but competed with people. Measured my strength, really, I prefer to say. And it was an indication that there was something there worth treating seriously.
Let's break off your second record. What will that be?
Well, I think to be able to play a marvellous church organ must be like being an orchestra all oneself. It's the nearest thing one can get to a full symphonic sound, that one controls oneself. So I'd have to have Bach, and I'd have to have the organ. And this is the marvellous toccata and fugue in D minor, played by Peter Herford.
The opening of the toccata from the Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Bach, Peter Herford at the organ. Now, music began to mean a lot to you. You began to take your singing seriously. That took you to London, didn't it?
Yes, it did. My bank gave me a transfer, which was very good of them.
At your request?
Yes.
Just down the road from Broadcasting House,
Just down the road, yes, it was indeed.
Was it your ultimate idea to go to the Royal College of Music or the Royal Academy?
It wasn't, because at that time I didn't think I had the qualifications for it. I realise now that I had. I'd taken piano exams, and I could have done piano as a second study, but I didn't have the right kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went privately to a Viennese teacher who had been recommended to me, Helena Izep, and in a way I missed something by not studying with other young people of my own age. I think one always does. And in another way, I think it's an advantage because I believe I got on faster than I would have done in
Rather cautiously, you began to learn the oratorio repertoire because that's a field in which there are jobs for young singers.
Yes, I think in my mind was the fact that you were either an alto or a soprano at that time. The idea of being a mezzo-soprano, the middle voice, came later.
You were a contralto to start with.
Yes.
How long was it before you resigned from the bank, before you cut adrift?
It wasn't very long after I came to London. I would say about 6 months.
And what was your first professional engagement?
I think it was probably either Glyndebourne Chorus or singing Messiah up in one of the Yorkshire chapels in Otley, just outside Leeds, something like that.
Back near home.
Yes.
You studied for a while in Salzburg. How did that come about?
Well, I won the second prize in the Daily Mail Kathleen Ferrier competition, and the money was given to me partly to spend on an instrument and partly to use for study abroad. So I decided to spend the summer in Salzburg would be helpful to my German, and as I'd never been abroad before, I thought it would be a helpful experience in growing up too.
Yes. Did you have any kind of part-time job that helped with expenses?
Yes, I had to do that. My father was very good to me and helped me as much as he could. But when I left the bank, and they were very understanding about that, I had a part-time job at Morley College, which paid the rent. It was marvellous.
Musical atmosphere.
Yes, it was. It killed two birds with one stone. It paid the rent and brought me into contact with many musical people, many interesting people. And I was very grateful for that.
What was the job? What did you have to do?
I was a sort of secretary. Morley College had an overspill at that time. Now they've got a new building. But in those days, in 1954, something like that, they had to use a school about half a mile away from the main building. They took it over from the local council in the evening. So I had to go along with all the registers and say hello to all the teachers, give them their register, and at the end of the evening take the registers back and say goodnight to the teachers and go home, which was a very easy job.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very demanding. Very useful, that
It was.
Let's have another record. We've got to number 3.
Well, this is a reminding record, chosen purely for that reason. it reminds me of the theatre, which has been such a heartwarming part of my life, something that I want to remember, colleagues that I want to remember, singers and places, all the opera houses I've worked in. But this one is a reminder of the golden days of Glyndebourne when we did Cavalli, La Callisto, which was tremendous fun. It's conducted by Raymond Leppard.
James Berman's voice and yours in a short excerpt from the second act of Cavalli's La Callisto. Lotte Lehmann gave some masterclasses in London that were rather useful to you.
Yes, she did. We were guinea pigs, and it was a very interesting experience and very helpful to me in a practical way.
Yes.
Because
where did she find you, or did you find her?
we went to audition for her.
Yes.
She wanted all the promising students in London to come and sing for her, and she picked a certain number of us. And we felt very privileged to be used by her in this way. And through it, I met my agent.
Oh, that's always
Amy
useful.
Tillis, yes, indeed, who came to one of the final concerts. And that actually appearing in those masterclasses, quite apart from the musical experience, was in this practical sense a tremendous step forward for me, quite a landmark.
You talked about your love for the theatre. What was your first solo engagement in opera? I mean, you had been at Glyndebourne in the chorus.
It stemmed from the Glyndebourne chorus because a small group was formed which went to Ingestre Hall, which is the home of the Earl of Salisbury, I think, and we did a performance of Dido and Aeneas there. And I had a little solo to sing as a second witch. That was my first essay into the theatrical world.
Well, since then, so many roles. You've always loved Handel. Why do you think his music suits you so well? What do you have in common?
It's an interesting question. I think it's like people. Some people you meet, you automatically like. You don't have to know them very well, but somehow the vibes are right. And I feel that's true with composers. I pick up a score and I feel somehow attuned to a certain type of person coming through the pages. It's the only way I can describe it.
Yes.
Handel is definitely one of these for me.
You joined Benjamin Britten's English Opera Company. That was an engagement that went on for a long time, took you to a lot of places.
Yes, it was a very long and happy association. And still goes on. I'm still terribly attached to Aldeburgh and everything that happens there.
You went with that company to Russia.
Yes.
Now, your pattern has always been, well, since those early days, has been opera part of the year and concert recitals the rest. And travelling incessantly.
Yes.
America so many times.
Yes, indeed.
Every year.
Every year.
You were building up your career on a kind of steady curve, weren't you? I mean, it moved very smoothly up.
Yes, it did.
Was that planned? Were you planning your career or
Not
just
really.
accepting it?
If I look back now, it looks so ordered that a pattern or a plan seems inevitable, but it wasn't at all. Things just seemed to happen. They came to me and I tackled them, and somehow the career worked. But it's very much a matter of luck that happens. And I think certain things you have to have in mind. For instance, as you were just saying a moment ago, my career has been this constant mixture of everything. And I'm very glad that this was so. I think all aspects of a singer's working life are important. And I wanted to have a go at them all. I wanted to try them all. Mm-hmm. And each of the different spheres of performing have stayed with me. I've been able to do such a varied sort of work each year. And again, it's something that I'm very grateful for.
The mixture was right.
Seems to be.
Another record.
This is a marvellously well-known piece. I know so much Handel and so much rare Handel, but it's all in my head. So I can replay that any time I like. I've chosen the water music, the Suite in G major, played by Neville Marriner, and the orchestra of the St. Martin in the Fields.
Handel's water music, the Suite in G, Neville Marriner conducting the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. You have, without doubt, an enormous repertoire. Are you good at memorizing? Are you a quick study?
I have been for many years. I'm not any longer. As I've grown older, I find it takes me a lot longer to pick up something entirely new. Once I've learnt it and I go back to it, say, perhaps 2 years later, there's no difficulty. I can pick it up again very quickly once it is in the head. Mm-hmm. But these days it does take quite a lot of knocking in. But for a long time this was no problem to me at all. It's a chore, though. It's a chore that I don't really enjoy. It's like being at school always, sitting down with a new set book and having to get it into one's head. It isn't my favourite part of the...
Can you learn straight off the page? Can you learn in aeroplanes, trains?
Yes, if it's not too difficult. But I like to work with the piano at home first.
You can play your own accompaniment for study.
Well enough for that, yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, your operatic work, you've been very careful in choosing the roles you'd sing, and indeed the opera houses in which you'd sing them. You've never agreed to sing at the Metropolitan New York, for instance.
No. I've had opportunities to sing opera all over the world, and it causes a great deal of distress that I've confined my operatic career to this country. But that was a plan. That was a specific choice which I had to make when I went to America and suddenly the floodgates opened. And I could see my life just disappearing somehow. I would never have been in my own country, because I spend so much time touring in other things apart from opera. The opera singer gets a rest and goes back home. Mm-hmm. The way my career planned out, I could see that I wasn't ever going to be able to do that. I would just go from one situation to another and not be at home as much as I wanted to be. And I knew that this wouldn't be right for me. I wouldn't have been happy doing that. And the only way I could see to control the situation at all sensibly was to make this stipulation that I would only do my theatre work in this country.
And choosing your roles equally carefully. I mean, you sing Donizetti, but not Verdi.
That's true. I think all of us have a very clear idea of our capabilities and our limitations. We have to. It's very clear to me that I would never be able to sing Verdi, much as I'd love to. Verdi, Wagner, Puccini, all the lovely big 16-inch gun roles, you know. I'm not built that way, and one has to be sensible about it. There are lots of things that I can do very well, which are marvellous music. So I don't feel that I've been deprived in any way.
A delightful double in your operatic career has been your two Didos, the Purcell and the Berlioz.
Yes, two very different ladies at either end of the scale. One a miniature, the Purcell a miniature and very short characterization, and the Berlioz spanning over a whole evening. It's very interesting to play the two.
You took over at Covent Garden in the Trojans in rather a hurry, didn't you?
Yes. I think Josephine Risi was ill. She was recording, and she just became ill through the overworker of the schedule, I believe. I'm not sure about that. And I had been doing it in English with Scottish opera, and the rest of the cast sang it in French. And it was very strange indeed for the audience, for Dido to be singing her words in English and the rest of the cast in French.
Yes.
But after that season, I did it again at Covent Garden, and they decided to play the whole thing in English, which was very interesting, I thought.
It must have been very difficult on the first occasion to pick up your cues in
Yes,
another
and for
language.
them to get them from me,
Quite.
it was very odd. Interesting, though.
Record number 5.
I must have Beethoven. And in this record, I'm killing two birds with one stone, because I want another keyboard instrument. I want to hear the piano. I'd miss the piano very much. So I get two things here. I get the Beethoven Piano Concerto number 5 in E flat, and I get the piano played by Ashkenazi, accompanied by Scholti.
The opening of the second movement of Beethoven's Piano Concerto number 5 in E flat, The Emperor, Ashkenazi with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra conducted by Sir George Scholti. Dame Janet, many people were surprised and saddened when out of the blue you announced that you were gently and gradually going to withdraw, and you started with some farewell performances in opera.
Yes, this, again, was a very calmly arrived at decision, one of the few things that I've planned ahead. The world of the theatre is terribly demanding physically, and I thought, as this year that we're in now, this season, I'm returning to almost all the opera houses I've worked in, with the exception of dear old Scottish Opera, it seemed a very good moment to make it my last season in the theatre, from the point of view of conserving my energy and, in fact, perhaps lengthening my career as a whole, cutting out this very severe physical strain which the stage imposes in order to go on doing concert work and recitals. Mm-hmm. It seems to me a very sensible thing, and a less cruel thing, certainly for me, than to wake up one morning and say, I'm never going to sing again. I would find that very painful.
Yes, an awful lot of people would.
And I don't think it's necessary.
But you are going to continue to sing to us in the concert.
I am indeed.
And broadcast.
Indeed, yes.
Have you any plans to teach? Are you going to take a pupil or two?
I will eventually. For the next 2 or 3 years, I've got a lot of journeys, a lot of long journeys planned. Mm-hmm. And I feel, again, strongly that teaching is a very great responsibility. And I can't be away. If I teach, then I must be absolutely at the convenience of a young person. I can't be shooting off to Australia in the middle of teaching somebody. So it'll have to wait a little while until I'm in England more or less all the time. I think that's only fair to pupils. But the idea fascinates me and terrifies me at the same time, because it is such a frightful responsibility.
Yes, it must be. And you might have a little more time for your garden. I know that's very precious.
Yes, indeed.
Record number 6.
This must be Schubert. And it isn't the sort of Schubert you would expect. I have a lot of songs, again, tucked away in my head, so I can sing those to myself on the island anytime I want. I've chosen the Symphony No. 9 in C major because I'm being greedy about the sound of the orchestra. I love the sound of the orchestra. And this marvellous recording of the Schubert by the Chicago Symphony and Giulini is something which will give me tremendous pleasure.
the opening of the third movement of Schubert's Symphony No. 9 in C, Giulini conducting the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Let's go straight into the next disc.
There are English composers like Benjamin Britten that I feel so close to, perhaps too close to. You were saying before, sometimes it's impossible to choose certain recordings because they mean so much to you. And in the circumstances of the desert island, some of these, who have been my friends, would be overwhelming to me to listen to. But Vaughan Williams I never knew as a person, and his music is so evocative to me of England, which I shall miss so much. And I shall sit and listen to this recording, thinking of the English countryside and the colours of the English landscape. It's the Symphony No. 5 indeed, conducted by John Barbirolli.
Sir John Barbirolli conducting the Vaughan Williams Fifth Symphony, and it was the beginning of the Romancer. Dame Janet, you're going to be on this desert island perhaps for a long time. Now, we talked about your love of gardening. That's going to be useful. You can do some cultivating. Have you any other ideas?
Well, I'd like to know what grows on it. Bananas, presumably.
Oh, bananas, yes. You could chin up a banana palm and get some bananas down.
What about coconuts?
Yes, you shake the tree to get coconuts down or throw stones up, don't you?
Well, that would suit me very well. If I could drink milk from coconut and eat bananas the rest of my life, I'd be perfectly happy without having to kill any fish I might get out of the water. I wouldn't fancy that somehow, hitting them on the head.
Have you any ideas on building a shelter?
No, I used to build camps as a child very successfully and loved it, so presumably that might come in handy.
Well, if they stood up then, they'll stand up now. Would you try to escape?
I don't think so. No, I don't like water. I'm not a very good swimmer.
Oh, well, in that case,
I think I'd be
you're
there.
very wise. Just stay until rescue arrives.
Yes.
And what's your 8th record?
Another composer that I couldn't possibly live without, which is Mozart. The overture from Così fan tutte, which is full of cheerfulness, which I think I'm going to need.
And you've heard that overture many times from the other side of the curtain,
yes,
haven't you?
indeed. Bring back a lot of very happy memories.
Part of the overture from Mozart's Così fan tutte, conducted by Colin Davis. If you could take only one disc of the 8 you've chosen, which would it be?
Very hard. I think it would have to be the Scarlatti, because it would keep my spirits up so well.
And one luxury to have with you, nothing of any practical use.
Couldn't think of anything until my father made the suggestion that what would keep me perfectly happy for the rest of my life would be a supply of pencils and paper on which to write.
In fact, you've just recently completed writing your autobiography, haven't you?
Yes, I've been doing it over the year. It's been fascinating.
So you can get to work on Vol 2.
Yes.
And one book.
I adore Jane Austen, read them at least once a year, but there are too many volumes of that. There's 6 different books at least. And what I would like to do is to take David Cecil's portrait of Jane Austen instead, which will remind me of all the books and keep me very happy.
Right. And into that book of Lord David, you may bind one of the novels. Which?
Persuasion.
Right. And thank you, Dame Janet Baker, for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you.